On the 9th of October 1999, a young lady of 19 years was reported missing by a couple of friends. Apparently, they had gone out, not with her. This couple of friends had been in an amusement park located in Spain, precisely Nias, Malaga. You know, they just went to have fun. So they had actually planned that they were going to meet up at some point with one of their other friends, a 19-year-old lady by name Rocio Wanninkhof. Apparently, they were supposed to, meet her halfway. So after hanging out at the park, with a group of friends, and once they were done, I think roughly around past 10 p.m. or so, they made their way over to meet up with Rocio. Now, according to these friends, Rocio, who had by that time been with her boyfriend, was supposed to drive down the hill from her boyfriend's apartment or from her boyfriend's place and, meet them at the designated location. But after this couple of friends had gotten there, Rocio was nowhere to be found. He waited, but she just didn't show up, which made them to raise an alarm. Okay. So apparently, not that same night anyway, the next day, after her mother had been informed of her disappearance, the mother decided to, go herself and check it out, So she went to where her friends said they had last, or where they had assumed that she had last been, which was her boyfriend's place. While going up that hill, while the mother was, taking a stroll up the hill with supposedly her ex-husband, just a little bit to the right, there was like a pool of, I wouldn't say a pool of blood, but there was like a large stain of blood on the ground somewhere, just to the right, on her right. And at that point in time, she had told her ex-husband, who goes by the name Wanninkhof, she had told him that, oh, one, it's possible that someone must have actually killed an animal there, And she was like, why don't we just go why don't we go take a closer look? And they did. As they made their way closer to the large stain of blood on the ground. The mother realized that there was a pair of sneakers on the floor that was quite similar to that of her daughter's. And she was like, oh, this sneakers right here kind of looks like Rocio's. One that Rocio has or owns. But one was like, it could just be a slight similarity, It could just be a slight similarity. It might not be hers exactly. So they drew much closer until they were finally directly, in front of that blood stain, which was exactly where the pair of sneakers was left. Only for her to, be startled, because what she had thought was just an assumption was actually far from, an assumption. The sneakers she had assumed to be Rocio's was actually Rocio's. She panicked immediately, and she screamed at Juan to call the police, but Juan was still, a little bit skeptical, a little bit doubtful that the sneakers might not really belong to Rocio. But she told Rocio that she was extremely sure that sneakers belonged to her daughter. And she was now more startled because not only was the sneakers close to the pool or the blood stain, it also had droplets of blood on it. So Juan went ahead to put a call across to the police, and they came over to see what the fuss was all about. Now the police, after the police arrived, they, patrolled the area and went ahead to give or put a call across to Dr. Francisco, who was a medical examiner. So apparently when they had called him, they told him that they wanted him to come around to a site, to a suspected crime site, right? And just make investigations, just to be sure of what just to clear their doubts or their assumptions, and he did so. So after he got there, they began to look around. They investigated the area and they saw that they kind of tracked, actually, when they started investigating the area, they had seen that there were there was trails of blood that were connected to that particular blood stain. So they went ahead to track it, to see where it led. So they did just that. They tracked the blood stain all the way from, or they tracked the dots of blood that had that had connected that blood stain they had initially seen. They tracked it to see where it would lead, right? So as they tracked the blood stain for some miles, based on the consistency of the blood droplets, right? They had, come to some kind of theory that the victim, whoever owned those blood droplets, must have been attacked quickly, right? And after being attacked, the victim might have tried to move quickly, either run or try to move quickly, because like I said, they're tracking these blood droplets. They had started from the blood patch and they were now tracking it to see, trailing it to see where it will lead. Now halfway into trailing the blood stain, it completely disappeared. There was no longer blood stain, right? But they furthered on, and as they furthered on, they realized that there was a huge loss of blood somewhere. Now, mind you, it started from a blood patch, right? Into droplets of blood that seemed like, whoever must have been bleeding was probably moving quickly or trying to move quickly with it. But at some point, the trail of blood completely disappeared. But they went ahead to they moved further to check around to see, okay, what happened. And as they continued to check, they found a larger patch of blood, right? And based on the stain, the blood stain on the ground, they had this theory that a body must have been dragged. First off, whoever was hit quickly. The person must have tried to escape, but whatever happened, and then probably, I don't know, something happened and it ended up being, or the victim ended up being dragged. Now, when they got to that mass of blood, that was it. The mass of blood ended at, a truck track. And that was it. So they tried to see if they could, use the truck or use that track to trace the truck that might have owned it, right? And also at that same location, they found a blood-stained tissue and a cigarette stub. So they tried to gather as much information as they could. They picked up all the pieces and they actually searched for items. They actually took back items that they felt like they could use to uncover what might have really happened there. So yeah, they took the cigarette stub back to their lab, and They ran it on their system. They ran the DNA on their system, and it turned out the DNA turned out to be owned by a male. But as at that particular point in time, they didn't know who exactly. Okay, so apparently after they had searched for Rocio and hadn't found her, they decided to involve the public. They decided to invite the public into the whole thing. So they had sent out handbills that had Rocio's picture, stating what she looked like, her hair, her eye color, and also stating that she was missing. About 600 people had volunteered to search for Rocio, but they hadn't still found her, right? Everyone was searching for Rocio. The whole community, several people were very much interested in assisting Rocio's family to find her, and they had searched for several days but hadn't still found her. Now, on the 25th day of this said search, a body was discovered. A body was discovered in Mabella and was said to have been hid in a hedge between housing developments somewhere in Mabella, 200 kilometers away from the road, which was not even that well accessible to cars. Okay, so this said corpse of this said body was suspected to be owned by the missing girl Rocio. Personnel had gone in there to confirm this. Now, when they went there, they realized that this body was more like a cadaver. It was more of bones. It had no organs. It had no organs. It was just a body of bones. And from the judgments, or based on what the body had looked like, it seemed as though that body had been there for so long because it had decomposed very much. Now, because of the fear of not wanting to lose that opportunity to get some information from the body, they immediately took it in, because apparently if you are to run some kind of autopsy on a corpse, if the corpse is already over decayed or decomposed, you wouldn't really get information, tangible information. Okay, so they were trying to rush to see if they could meet up with getting some kind of information, no matter how little. Now, meanwhile, in the said site where the body was found, they also discovered bags. They discovered, black bags, cellophane bags that had human clothing in them, right? And when they opened to check what kind of clothing the bags contained, they were all female wears, t-shirts, majorly t-shirts. And there was a particular t-shirt that was assumed to be owned by Rocio that had been found inside that bag. So, they took all of this in for more, investigation. They also, while running their investigation, they also discovered that Rocio's body had 2 fabric strands. They also took that in. As they investigated the body further, they also found that the body had severe injuries, majorly to the back. Now, apparently, based on these injuries, it looked as though someone or the victim must have been stabbed at the back with a sharp-edged kind of object. And judging based on the puncture holes, it seemed as though the victim had been stabbed severally, and also judging based on how the body was placed or how the body had been found. They had several theories, rather. One of those theories was that the victim must have, for the assailant to have been able to stab the victim that number of time in such a short time frame, it means that the victim must have been demobilized. Also, a second theory was that, and this theory is, based on, like I said, judging based on how the corpse had been found. Now, apparently, when they had found the corpse, the legs were unnaturally spread too wide apart. So, their theory, a second theory came up that whoever must have, done this probably altered the position of the body to make it seem as though it was an assault, a sexual assault. And they wondered, if whoever did this, they wondered, the theory was, since the person had altered the body to make it look like, it was a sexual assault, it's possible that the assailant was trying to deviate attention from him or herself. Now, this thought led to the investigators to consider that whoever might have perpetrated such was actually someone that was close to Rocio, right? And wanted them to look outside. So They continue to run their investigations. They take the body in, and yeah, they continue to run their investigations. Based on how the body had been found, there were so many, there was a whole lot of suspicion on who the perpetrator might have been. Now, like I said, these are investigators who are obviously professionals. They are experts in what they do. And based on everything they had gone or run through pertaining to finding the corpse and how it was found and all those little things that were connected to the corpse, they came to one conclusion, which was that the mother, I wouldn't say it was a conclusion, but they came to another theory that the mother could have actually been, a crime of passion. Now, according to them, a crime of passion is a crime that is committed in rage, rage or revenge, and is mostly committed by people close to the victim. Meanwhile, before I, move further, going back, rewinding, when that journalist had gone to, make his interviews, Rofio's Rofio's boyfriend was amongst the several people that he interviewed. Right? Now, not much information was gotten, or would I say was given, but yeah, fast forwarding, after the officials had discovered that, okay, this could probably be, a crime of passion, so it's definitely something that needs to be looked into more closely. They decided that, they were going to delve more into interviewing persons that had been close to Rocio Wanninkhof. So they interviewed, several persons that had been related, that were close to Rocio, both relatives and close friends and friends, anybody that had some kind of link or some kind of attachment to Rocio was interviewed. Now, amongst those several persons, or after the interview had been done, due to the fact that the case was very, very sensitive, or I wouldn't say after the interview had been done, while the interview was ongoing, due to the fact that this case, Rofio's case, was now a very sensitive case, in the sense that everybody was now chiming in. Like, the whole media was chiming in, the public had chimed in, rather. They were so interested to know what's happening, what was being done about Rofio's disappearance. So that alone had put some kind of pressure on the officials involved, both investigative officials and even down to I would say the court, although this matter had not yet gone to the court anyway, but I'm just giving you a hint. So you know, um, because of how involved the society had become in the case, the elite investigators were invited, you know, to make more rounds or to make more investigations, you know. They were called the city guard. Now, mind you, this is something that happened in Spain. So I just want you to have that in mind, that all of this had occurred in Spain. And yeah, so continuing, the elite guards, which is the city guards, had been invited to, you know, hop in on the case. Now, these people had obviously made more research on, you know, suspected persons that had some kind of affiliation with the case. Now, after conducting several interviews, you know, they finally came to a conclusion. They finally narrowed their suspects down to three people: a woman and two men. A woman and two men. Now, these were like the suspects, or these were, you know, the results of their findings, which was that, you know, we finally have like three suspects in mind, and they are two men rather, and one woman. Now, like I said, because the public was already so involved in this case, you know, it was rumored that a woman had been seen stabbing the handbill of Rocio, and that created a whole lot of engagement, in the sense that, you know, immediately that rumor had gone out, the whole public started accusing the lady, saying she was Rufio's murderer. It wasn't too long after, you know how social media is, it wasn't too long after, you know, news spread, and, you know, one thing led to the other. Her photo was leaked on social media as the person who had murdered Rocio, and she went by the name Maria Vasquez. Now, when all of this, you know, was in heat, you know, the officials, the security, or let me just say the investigative officials on the case, decided to go ahead to arrest Vasquez. You know, so apparently Rufio's mom, who goes by the name Alicia Honros, if I'm not mistaken, was called to inform her of Vasquez's arrest. And when she came in to give her statement, I mean Alicia rather, not Aliyah. Did I say Aliyah? Alicia. When she came in to give her statement to the investigators, she disclosed that she and Vasquez were very close. They had been extremely close. They were closer than close friends. You know? Apparently, when Alicia had split from her then husband by name Wanninkhof, you know, she found love in a woman by name, you already know who, Vasquez. Now, when she was giving her statement, said she was shocked because, you know, she wasn't expecting that. I mean, she wasn't expecting Vasquez, but at the same time, she's not too shocked too, because she has always seen Vasquez to be jealous. And now that she's things have come to light, right? She's finally realizing that, you know, it is actually possible that Vasquez was or had been the assailant, had been the person who had murdered her daughter. Now, she said this and gave her reason as to why she said she feels and must be and will be or believes that Vasquez is actually the murderer, because she said, this is Alicia, she said that Vasquez knew that Rocio was never in support of their relationship. Now, Alicia and Vasquez had somehow ended up in a relationship that lasted for 11 years after Alicia had, you know, splitted from her then husband. Now, according to Alicia, she said that Rocio was never in support of that relationship. You know, Rocio had never been in support of their relationship, right? And now that she's thinking in that light, she sees that as every reason for Vasquez to retaliate, because after they split, they could have actually gotten back together, but they didn't, or it didn't happen because of Rocio. So she feels like, you know, Vasquez must have gone as far as killing Rocio just so that she can be with her. Now, obviously, this is Spain, a country that is against lesbianism. So you can imagine the uproar that would have actually caused as at that time when, you know, this news had gone out, right? Now, I forgot to let you guys know that Vasquez's arrest happened in September 2000, okay? Exactly September 2000. And when, you know, all of these news had broken out about Vasquez's relationship with Alicia, the public didn't really welcome that information. Why? Because, like I said, Spain is not a country that, you know, takes lesbianism too lightly. Now, based on this same reason, because of this same fact, or this same reason that Vasquez had been in an intimate relationship with Alicia, it made the public more mad and more hyped, in the sense that, you know, as at that instance, they just knew that definitely she has to be the one. She has to be the murderer of Rocio. Now, there was a whole lot of news going around, the press had a whole lot to talk about pertaining to this relationship, and most of their opinions or most of their views were targeted at Vasquez, in the sense that, like there was a whole lot of conversation. There were a whole lot of conversations on the internet or over the internet, and in radio stations about Vasquez and Alicia's relationship. Now, the major conversation as at that time was, more at Vasquez. Like, it was more about Vasquez, and the conversations then were like, they brought up, lesbian traits, how lesbians can be, and most of these conversations described, how violent a lesbian can be. So, like, they used all of, like, the whole media, the social media, the press, like I said, had a lot to talk about, and they used all of that to really, really, really go in on Vasquez. So this is social media, and social media has a very, it has power, so because of how intense it was as at then, the investigative officers had to go in and do what they needed to do pertaining to Vasquez's arrest. So 1 year after the arrest, several interviews were conducted in Malaga's courthouse. The courthouse in Malaga. Several people were brought to, testify. Amongst those persons that have been brought in to lay their testimony or lay their statements rather, was the civil guard, the elite civil guard. Now, the elite civil guard said that as at that particular time, as at that particular moment, they didn't really have anything that was a proof, against Dolores Vasquez. But they were going to make more findings or more investigations to clarify all of that. This was the statement that was given by the civil guard themselves. Well, like I said, because of how sensitive this case was, there were a lot of people queuing to go into the courtroom to participate in the proceedings of the courtroom. And also, like I mentioned earlier, due to how involved the media already was, everybody kept chiming in saying that Dolores was guilty. you know, that she was actually Rocio's murderer, even when, you know, the civil guard had already said that, you know, as of now, the evidence we have so far don't point at Dolores. There's no proof yet, although they were still making investigations. So they brought in Dolores's maid, who had actually been the woman who had reported to have seen Dolores stabbing Rocio's picture you know, continuously. She had said, when the maid came in to give a testimonial, she said that she had witnessed Dolores screaming and stabbing the picture of Rocio Wanninkhof repeatedly. Now, in Wanninkhof's defense, Wanninkhof said that she had been in the kitchen as at the time her maid came in and caught her doing that. And she said that she had been crying, staring at Rocio's photo. And because her maid doesn't really understand English, she was trying to explain to her maid that Rocio had been killed, which was why, you know, she had picked up a knife, you know, pointing to the picture and screaming and shouting at her, saying, you know, trying to like demonstrate to the maid that, you know, Rocio had been murdered in her defense. You know, that was the statement she made pertaining to that allegation. And, you know, nobody really believed. I would say the media still, and the public, you know, didn't ride with her story. Okay? You know, so after dragging the court case on, and you know, the media getting even more heated about the fact that Dolores, you know, hadn't still been given a verdict, especially with, you know, like there was, especially with the fuss on the media, on social media, the jury of Malaga went ahead to pronounce its verdict. And its verdict was that, you know, Dolores was guilty. Now, before this verdict was pronounced, Dolores was allowed to make a statement. And in her statement, she said she urged, you know, all of Spain to go out and look for the real murderer, because she wasn't the one that murdered Rocio. That was the statement she gave. She said she had said that she wasn't the one that murdered Rocio, and that, you know, they should, instead of them wasting so much time on her, they should go out and look for the real murderers of Rocio, because she didn't do it. Okay? This was what Dolores said. Well, after everything was said and done, you know, Dolores was finally given a verdict that she was guilty, and, you know, because of that, she was sentenced to, I think, 5 to 10 years, if I'm not mistaken. She was sentenced to, you know, 5 to 10 years of jail time. Now, August 14, 2003, there was an alarm that had been put out on a 17-year-old girl that had gone missing in Coin. On the trade fair day. Okay? And Sonia's mom said she had woken up that morning to go check up on her beautiful daughter, Sonia. But on getting to her room, the bed was empty. Now, initially, Sonia had stepped out with her friends to, you know, participate in the coin fair festival, and was supposed to have returned with those friends, but for some reason my daughter wasn't there. So, you know, she immediately put a call across to her friends, asking them, you know, where her daughter was. And they told her, you know, that they had dropped Sonia at the front door and left. You know? But Sonia's mom said, okay, you dropped her at the front door, but she's not here. But, you know, the friends gave Sonia's mom the assurance that, you know, after the whole fair, they had come back to Sonia's place and dropped her at the front door before leaving. Okay, after that call was made, Sonia's mom decided to go out to, you know, see if maybe Sonia was probably outside, you know, just to like give a check. Now, when Sonia's mom stepped out, the first thing she saw was Sonia's bag on the floor, which made her wonder, you know, why Sonia would have decided to leave her bag on the floor in front of the house, you know. So the mother, being a detective that she is, or she was trying to be, decided to go check it out herself, you know, check what Sonia must have been doing, you know, outside, that she had to leave her bag on the floor, you know. So she went out. She took, not too far away from her house, like 3 doors away from her own house, was a tree, you know. this mini tree that people grow in this kind of ceramic pots. And on that tree, I think she found other belongings of her daughter. So I'm not too sure how this played out. I'm not too sure if it was her daughter's phone she had first of all found on the floor in front of the house, which made her, go out to check other areas, and then she finally found, other items or other belongings of her daughter, or if it was the bag. But I feel like one belonging was first of all found in front of the house. It could have been the phone, it could have been the bag, but you know what, I think it's the phone. I'm not too sure. I think it was the phone that was found first. And when she went to the tree, or when she went towards that tree, she found other belongings of her daughter, which was, I think, the bag and her sandals. Now, just by the corner where her husband's car had been parked alongside her neighbor's car, she realized that there was blood stain on the I think travigator light. First of all, her neighbor's travigator light was broken. She realized that I think it was the right travigator light that was broken. I'm not too sure. I think, yeah, it should have been the right that was broken. And also she noticed that there was blood stain on her husband's car, the neighbor's car, and the floor, the ground directly under both cars. So after seeing this, she went ahead to put a call across to the police, and that was when the mayor of Coin, who goes by the name Clavijo Sanchez, was called, and this was reported to him. Now, according to him, he said, he was going about his business when he received a call from the FBI saying, or asking him if he had been aware that one of the Coin girls had gone missing, and he said he had no idea. And after getting this call, he immediately placed another call to the investigators for them to go ahead to check what the fuss was all about. So these investigators, finally, that was when they went to Sonia's place. And not too long after, there were lots of press people there, interviewing, asking questions as to what had happened. And Sonia's mom was, giving a rundown on, what had happened that morning after she had woken up. So immediately after this got reported, there was a whole lot of media, around there that had gone to interview the family to know, to get information on what might have happened. And Sonia's mom, who goes by the name Encarna, relayed the information as to how her daughter had gone missing, right? So investigators came around to take items, to retrieve those found items, which were Sonia's bag, her shoe, the broken indicator lights, yes, the broken indicator lights, and her sandal. All those items were retrieved and taken back to their office for more further investigation. Obviously, with the media being around, the news had started going around, or had already gone around, saying, informing the public that a 17-year-old girl had gone missing on that very day. After this news, or after the investigators had, gotten the information they needed from Encana, their first operation was to investigate sexual assaults that had happened in that area, because that area was very was known to be an area that had several sexual assault cases. So that was the first route they took. They went in to make more investigations on the sexual assaults that had taken place in that vicinity, and try to see if there was anyone that was quite familiar, try to put things together and see what leads they can come up with. Okay. So it had been, or the search had lasted up to 5 days, until when the search had lasted up to 5 days when they finally got information from people who lived in Madrid, saying that a body had been found in the neighboring village, right? At first this was just a rumor, and not so long after the investigators decided to go hop in and check what it was, or what body, or who the body belonged to. They went in, and although that place had been already checked before, prior to that day, by the police dogs, it's possible that they hadn't or didn't discover the body the day they checked, because as at that particular time, dogs use sense to trace or to uncover things, but as at that particular time it had rained so heavily, so this was this is an assumption as to why probably the dogs were unable to trace the body that day, the day they went to that neighboring village to make their search rounds. So they finally went to the neighboring village to uncover what might have, or whose body it might have been. And when they went there, it was dimmingly clear whose body it was. Sonia's body had been dumped in a stream, with a stone on top of it. Whoever had done it, whoever did it, dumped her body in, the person dumped her body in the stream and placed a stone on top of the body. Okay, so after this body is retrieved, they take it in as quick as possible to analyze it, because remember what I said about a body decaying. So they took it in as quick as they could, as quick as possible, to analyze it. Yeah, based on the state they had retrieved the body in, they had a theory that the victim, it's possible that the perpetrator had met up with the victim probably in front of her door, and struck her severely, leaving her unconscious before finally taking her into his car. It's possible that she might have struggled, which probably led to the indicator lights being broken, and he then probably took her 11 kilometers away from, the house, before finally inflicting both internal and external wounds and strangling her to death. This was based on their theory, right? So remember, the police or the investigators were able to retrieve items from the scene. Some of such items, like I said, were Sonia's handbag, her sandal, her phone, and also the broken indicator light. Now, when they ran their forensics on these items, the broken indicator lights came out with some DNA, and when they put that DNA in their database, it happened that DNA sample matched with another DNA sample that they had in their database, and the DNA sample it matched with was the DNA sample that had been retrieved from the cigarette stub. Yeah. So now, with this information, everything became very, very dicey. Everything became even more sensitive, because if the DNA on this broken indicator light is matching the DNA on a cigarette stub of which we have already arrested the said suspect or perpetrator, whose DNA, or who then owns this DNA that is on this indicator light? Like everything just became very uncomfortably sensitive. And now, because of the fact that someone was already serving time for the crime that was related or affiliated with the cigarette stub, they had to move as quick as possible to rectify things. Okay, so after all of this had happened, Florentino, who was the one in charge of, who was a police commissioner and was, he had been related, or how do I put it? He had been the police commissioner assigned to even the previous case, which concerned Rocio Wanninkhof. After this thing had happened with Sonia, he got a call from one of the, investigative bodies saying that a certain woman of Chilean origin wanted to speak with him. She had some information she wanted to give him, asking if he could come over to Coin. Was it Coin? I can't remember the location exactly, but they asked him if he could come over, and he did exactly just that. Now, this woman by name Cecilia King was said to have known a certain man who went by the name Tony King. According to her, she said she had met this man sometime around 1996. That she didn't know much about him because he never really, disclosed much about himself. But, they fell in love, and she got pregnant by him. And that was 5 months later after meeting him. She got pregnant by him and told him about it, and that was when they decided to further the relationship by getting married. Now, she said at some point, she started noticing some weird things. Well, he started changing. He started telling lies, coming home late, crashing cars. And all of that. Now, she said on a certain evening in 1999, he came home very late at night. She was with her daughter Sabrina, and he went straight to the bathroom. He went straight to the bathroom and locked himself in it, and didn't come out until very much later. And after he did, he went right back out. Now, she said immediately after he stepped out, she went to check out, what must have left or kept her husband so long in the bathroom. And on getting to the bathroom, she said that the bathroom was outrageously clean, which was very, which made her uncomfortable, because she said her husband was never that clean. He was the type to leave things on the floor, scattered and all of that. But on that particular evening, it was different. So she said, she began to have her suspicions, and not too long after that occurrence, when she went back to watch the TV, that was the same day she realized that a young girl by name Rocio Wanninkhof had gone missing. Now she says when this happened, she immediately reached out to her family and friends saying that, she had suspected that her husband killed Rocio Wanninkhof. But her friends were like, what? How can a man as sweet as Tony do such a thing? They said she was crazy, that Tony King couldn't have done such. So she said eventually she splitted with Tony because of the suspicions she had about him rather. And finally ended up with someone else by name David. Now, Miss Cecilia hadn't reached out to the police then when she first had her suspicion. She only reached out to the police when she heard of a second girl missing. And she said that when she heard that Sonia had gone missing, she had somehow seen, Tony that time. And when she saw him, he had, some kind of injury on his right hand. I can't remember if it was his right or his left, but he had some kind of hand injury. And that was when she was like, Tony did it. And she went ahead to call the cops or call, someone that, she could talk to about it. And that was when, she called Mr. Florentino or spoke with, Mr. Florentino. She didn't call him, She spoke to someone who spoke to him, who connected them together, and they finally spoke. Yeah. So, after this news was relayed to Florentino, the police commissioner, he said that he immediately placed a call to a British ambassador, I think. Sorry, he said he placed a call to someone who worked in the embassy, someone who was more like a middle officer, a middleman for the white people, in their country, by name John O'Neill. And that was when he relayed to John O'Neill this information he had gotten and asked him to run, a search on who Tony King was, because obviously Tony King wasn't from Spain. He was a foreigner. He was a British citizen. So, they ran the scan or the search, or rather John O'Neill placed the call across to, some certain persons in London who ran the search or ran the scan on Mr. Tony King. After which they got back to John O'Neill saying that, Mr. Tony was a very dangerous person based on, the information they had of him. He was a dangerous person who was affiliated with several records of sexual assault, and his real name was Alexander. Was it Alexander? Or his real name was I think it was Tony Bromich, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, his real name was Tony Bromich, and he had committed several sexual assault crimes in London. Okay, thank you for informing me very late. Okay, so after this information was gotten by John O'Neill, he passed it on to Florentino, who in turn, didn't waste that much time. They started, running a surveillance on him. As that when they had run the surveillance on him, they realized, or they found out that, he worked in a pub known as, called the Browers Arms, I think. And after they, it's a surveillance, so obviously they're following his every step to see what he does and all of that, and where he goes to, So after Tony King was done with work from the Bowers Arms, they followed him home. They saw that he went to a school, and in the school had some kind of house in between, or some kind of room in between, I'm not too sure, but he lived in the school, not in the school, but like the school premises or the school. I don't know how it was set up, but I definitely know that he had an apartment in that same compound or vicinity. Compound, actually. So they also noticed that he owned a car, a Mazda car, that had a broken indicator light. Yeah. They were able to get, a DNA sample from one of his glass cups, and after they ran it through their database, it was a definite match with both the cigarette stub they had gotten from, Rocio Wanninkhof's scene, and the indicator light that was gotten from Sonia. There were handprints on the indicator light, and there were handprints on the plastic bags as well that had been retrieved from Rocio Wanninkhof's scene. Okay. So after that was done and confirmed, he was arrested immediately. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Now, a certain woman by name Kristen P. Blower narrates her own experience or her encounter with the said King Bromich, or Tony Bromich rather. I mean, this nigga is out here having so many names, like. So she said in the year 1985, she, was on her way back home and, was about to take the elevator when she saw something that looked like a shadow of a man that seemed to have been, probably in the elevator. Yeah. That seemed to have been in the elevator that had been coming, I think it was, no, that seemed to have been standing somewhere up. Yeah, I think so. Somewhere up where the elevator was supposed to, stop, like after it goes up. She said she had seen something that looked like a shadow of someone who had seemed to have been, standing up, standing on the floor where her elevator was supposed to get to. Now she said at first she didn't really take it as anything because, she just assumed that it was probably someone who was waiting to use the elevator or something. So she didn't really, pay that much attention to it. Now, Christine says she got into the elevator and the elevator, immediately she got into the elevator, she got struck at, or she got hit. She immediately, lost consciousness. That all she remembers was she was bleeding profusely from her head because she, it was a trauma to her head, and she was bleeding. Her hair was all over in her face, and that shock caused her to she fell on the elevator floor and was bracing her head, more like she was trying to protect her head as she was still bleeding, and she was trying to she didn't know what was going on. When someone hits you that quick, when it's a trauma to the head, it's like quick blackout. I can say that because I know. So she said Bromich picked her up from the ground and held her in a neck choke, right? And she said he was fiddling with her as he held her in that neck choke. He had started fiddling with her, and he couldn't really he tried accessing her buttons, her trouser buttons, but he couldn't really access it because she had a scarf tied on her waist. She said I think he undid her scarf, something like that, and started using it to strangle her. In the process of her struggling with him, she whispered, begging him to leave her, that she was pregnant. That she wasn't going to tell anyone that please, he shouldn't hurt her, that he can, just leave quietly. She's not going to scream, she's not going to tell anyone that she's pregnant. Please, he shouldn't hurt her. She pleaded, and she said in that instant she touched something soft in him, that caused him to withdraw. He withdrew from her, and after he withdrew from her, she was like, you can go, I promise I wouldn't tell anybody, I won't tell anyone, and that was how he ran off, and she never saw him again. Now, she said the reason why she remembers all of this, or why all of this is just coming back to her, was because when she was watching the news that had the so-called Alexander Tony Kings on it, she said the first thing she did when she saw him was to scream, saying that isn't Tony King's, that is Bromich, that is Bromich, that is Bromich. Okay. Now, apparently, Bromich had been in the business of assaulting women for like several years. And his home base, he had been doing that in his home base, London. It said in the around 1985 or 1986 exactly, he had been arrested for those several sexual assaults, and got released after his trial in 1991, but he still went ahead to do the same thing that landed him back in prison again. And he got released again. I think his first sentence was 10 years in 1986, and after he got out after his trial in 1991, and still went back to the same thing and got arrested again and got released again. What are we doing here? Anyway, so he got released, and he tried it again one last time in London. It was reported that a man was he had tried sexually assaulting another Hungarian woman, and it was reported. And in that, I think in that instance, or that particular time he had done that, there was a CCTV that was able to capture his face. So as at that time in London, there was this crime show, very popular crime show known as the Crime Watch, that mostly discussed about crime and suspects. And I think it's that CCTV capture of his face was sent to the show, and they aired it, asking enlightening the public and telling them to let them know if they find him. So I think after Bromich had seen that, he knew that, oh, okay, this is it for me in London, because now everybody knows what I look like. So obviously that was his cue to leave London, and he left the country for Spain. Yeah, so He left the country for Spain, and he went there to continue what he had always been doing. Interesting. Okay. So meanwhile, after back in Spain, now in I think 2000 and I think it was 2003, if I'm not mistaken, when all of this had escalated out of hand for Mr. Bromich, everything was then trying to be worked on quickly, because Miss Dolores Vasquez had already spent 519 days in prison. She was actually released almost immediately after, and in her first statement she said that she was being owed an apology for being locked up for a crime she didn't commit, that nobody could prove that she had committed such a crime, but they still went ahead to lock her up for it. So she said she expected an apology from the government, but she's still yet to get an apology from anyone for being locked up in prison for a crime that she didn't commit. Meanwhile, back at Mrs. Honros, or Miss Honros, because she was single at that time. I don't know. Back at Miss Honros, in her defense to the statement that was made by Miss Dolores Vasquez, she said she wasn't the one that locked her up, so she didn't owe Miss Dolores any apology. Well, it was just a back and forth anyway. Miss Dolores had said that they had threatened her, that no matter what she had tried to say or do, she was still going to end up in prison, Back to Mr. Bromich. In court, when they were processing his crimes, the foreign Interpol had tried to reach out to him so that he can confess to the crimes he had committed back when he was back in London, but he refused to cooperate with them. Now, according to my source, initially they say he had actually confessed to the crime, but afterwards he became defensive. Like, he kept saying he wasn't the one that did it. He kept dragging Dolores into the situation, saying that he had nothing to do with it. Like, he kept trying to like involve Dolores in it, saying that he was not guilty and all of that. I don't know, like, it was a very funny act, if you ask me. But yeah, hi guys, welcome back to the end of this video. So yeah, my opinion on this particular true life crime, I would say that personally, that guy was given way too many chances, because you can't tell me you arrest someone like 2 times and he still goes back to do the same thing. You arrest him the 3rd time. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing? He made it obvious that he wasn't ready to be a free man, because he was gonna go back to doing the same thing. My condolences to families that lost, pretty beautiful girls. Like, really, seriously, man, they didn't deserve that at all. But things happen for us to like, learn from, for us to, gain more experience from, and be wiser and be more practical and calculative about our decisions. So yeah, like, I feel like this was definitely I don't even know if I should say an eye-opener, but it was definitely like, a scary one, because anyway, thank you for sticking with me to the very end of this video. If you enjoyed this video, you know what to do. Please give it a thumbs up. If you would love to see more of these videos, please drop your comments. Say it in the comment section. If you've got an opinion, if there's something you have in your head bothering you that you'd like to air out, hello, you can say it in the comment section. I'm definitely going to respond. And yeah, if you want to make it a more private conversation, you can hit me up at touchegang@gmail.com. I definitely will respond as well. Yeah, if you are a gang member, thank you so much for sticking with me. Thank you for supporting this channel. If you're new, hello, what are you waiting for to get initiated into this game? What are you waiting for? Yeah, all right. Thank you guys for sticking with me to the very end of this video. I'd love to hear from you, your thoughts, your suggestions. If there's any crime story you want me to cover, definitely drop it in the comment section. I definitely will watch them. Until then, see you next time. Bye.